I was hoping to not get too political with Drinker and keep the objections mainly story based as to why he has issues with Strange, but he does bring politics into the review. So I'll deal with that a little bit. I should say I did not intend to do that, but it is in the review. So let's start off with one story based issue he has, and unfortunately, it's kind of typical that he's not very intelligent or not paying attention both to Strange and the MCU as a whole. He doesn't seem to understand it.
The movie also makes the point that she'd have to kill the existing Wanda in the new universe so that she could take over her life and kids. I mean, ignoring the fact that you'd then have two Scarlet Witches of equal power facing off against each other, probably resulting in massive collateral damage, it doesn't even need to fucking happen in the first place.
Well, the obvious response would be no, those would not be two Scarlet Witches because the film goes through a lot to establish there's Wanda and there's Scarlet Witch. They're two separate people. So she wouldn't be facing off against necessarily another Scarlet Witch. I guess he missed that part. Also, she does have that magical book. Presumably, this Wanda she may be facing does not have that book. So again, they wouldn't have equal amounts of power. He just isn't paying attention to the film or just doesn't care. And then he brings up that Wanda herself has been declining, but the reasons she's been declining are, well, very kind of silly and superficial.
This film is rarely short on interesting things to look at, apart from Wanda's costume perhaps, which is distinctly less interesting than it used to be. Performance
It actually took me a while to figure out what the hell he was talking about. Then it's like, oh, you're saying she was more interesting because the other costume showed her breasts more. Well, I do think Elizabeth is pretty, and I gotta be honest, I don't really like her as Wanda. I don't like her performances for the most part. Strange is the exception. I actually found her pretty good here, but honestly, I don't even understand why they picked her. It just seems she is a very generic, pretty, beautiful actress, and she's okay as an actress, but that's about it. And I also gotta be honest that it is okay to be somewhat superficial on these things. I mean, for instance, if they do Fantastic Four and use Jessica Alba again, I really wouldn't have an objection. She's not Sue by any means, right? She doesn't really look like Sue. She doesn't capture the personality. You know, she is what she is. She's very sexy and she's very beautiful. And if they went with somebody like Emily Blunt, I don't think would be better. I mean, Emily would be kind of the same thing. She doesn't really resemble the character, but she's very pretty. It's all right to be superficial to some degree, but was that meant to be a joke? That's a really not good joke. And if he wants to ward off issues of sexism, really not a very good set of comments. Let's get to the more central objection, which is also crazy and stupid.
thing that really pisses me off about Wanda is the absolutely ridiculous arguments she tries to make to justify her actions that absolutely no one ever seems to call her out on. Like, at one point, Strange challenges her on the morality of murdering an innocent child just so she can live out a fantasy version of her own life in a different reality. I mean, I guess we'll forget about the hundreds of other people she's murdered by this point, because I guess they don't count as people. But anyway, her response to this is, and I kid you not, yeah, so? You gave the Power Stone to Thanos, so you're totally no better than me.
You serious?
What the fuck kind of retarded argument is that? He gave the Power Stone to Thanos because it was literally the only option out of millions of possible realities that would allow them to defeat him and save the entire universe. Not to mention sacrificing his own life in the process. How is that in any way comparable to what you're doing here?
But before he can deliver a killing blow to Iron Man, Doctor Strange bargains for his life in exchange for the Time Stone.
Well, that's a lot to parse. I just want to stay for a moment. At the very beginning, he says, the film does not challenge Wanda. And then he says, Strange challenges Wanda. Well, which is it? Your own editing says they did challenge her. They're very explicit what she's doing is wrong. America Chavez is pleading for her life for most of the film. I don't know, not paying attention. But what's even more shocking and alarming is he says Thanos gave up the Power Stone. Now they're trying to make a comparison between those two events. What do they think they're doing? Well, he might have a point, except that event never happened because Thanos did not give up the Power Stone. He gave up the Time Stone. Even Mahler got this right. He gave up the time stone. Did he even look at the Mahler video on Avengers? He makes that actually pretty clear. You can even just read it up in synopses. If you went through almost any review that was competent, they would have told you he gave up the time stone. That never happened, so you haven't said anything because the basic point was just filled with errors that you didn't say anything. Kind of ironic saying that, who wrote this garbage? That would apply to your video. You literally said a very garbage filled, nonsensical statement. Doesn't mean anything because you got it wrong. And not just a little bit wrong, but 100% wrong. An insanely wrong statement. And that's pretty much this whole video. It's just a lot of errors, mistakes, really bad assumptions, and him not paying attention. But I will grant that some of the things he brings up are legitimate, and I will discuss those, but that's a very small part of the video. It's just a very polemical mess of insane stupidity and just a lot of his prejudices dressed up in, quote, critical, drunk speech or whatever he does.